¿Qué se supone que tenemos que hacer? Alex,
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm zoning out. I'm tired. What'd you say again? ¿Qué dijiste?
I said, ¿qué se supone que tenemos que hacer?
What are we gonna
What are we
do?
supposed to do now?
Yeah. Well, see, look, I just wanted to start a podcast with some friends and
I have
just talk.
no idea what a podcast is.
We're doing it right now, man. Like just this. I just wanted to talk, and I picked a theme for today. So today, I wanted to do the English language. I thought that was appropriate since I think we both know a thing or two about that, and I guess the first things first. We might. Oh wait, let me make sure the microphones are on. Yeah. um. So yeah, I mean, I guess just introduce ourselves. I'm Alex. I have an associate's of arts and teaching. I'm working on my bachelor of science, and I guess your turn.
All right. Okay.
It's taking too much. It's taking too much computer power to do that.
Okay. Okay. All right. No problem. I just wanted to show you something.
Lo siento, hermano.
It's like some sort of a typical dessert. But I'm gonna show it to you later. All right. Okay. So I'm supposed to say something about me, right?
Yeah, why not?
Well,
I mean, we're just talking, man.
all right. Well, I'm from Argentina. Um, I work as a testing engineer. Um, I used to work as a bank teller. Um, and what else? I don't know. I studied English like in 2013 or something. And after that, I took an exam, international exam, and I passed. Um, an exam that is sent to the University of Michigan, corrected and send it back, and I passed. I
Yeah,
aced it.
yeah.
Okay. I like skateboarding. Um, I'm currently studying software developer. Um, and that's it.
Yeah, like I want to ask, man. Like, I don't know if I think we probably have talked about this in the past, but like, what do you think about since your native language is Spanish and Spanish, the plurals it's either s, or ses, and it's like it's never anything else. What do you think about like how weird how strange I guess you could say some of the plurals in English are? Like, do you know what I mean?
Give me an example.
Okay, so in Spanish, in Spanish, the plural of nebula is nebulas. In English, the plural of nebula is nebulae. And the plural of synthesis is syntheses. The plural of goose is geese. Man is men. Woman is women. Um,
Mouse is mice.
yeah, 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 yeah. Exactly.
Well, yeah. It's like languages are a different world. They might have some different things that are in common, some common stuff. For example, Spanish is easier to learn for a person that speaks Portuguese, for example. It's more similar, and I don't know, English and German. They're like they're brothers, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
German's still hard
based
to learn.
on yeah, well, based on what you said, yeah, it is sometimes it's irritating, sometimes it's
Yeah.
funny to find those particular things of the language that you're learning, and you might hate them at the beginning, but then you get used to it, and that's the beauty of learning a new language, which is a great achievement for a human being. You know, be able to speak another language is amazing.
I agree, and I mean, like honestly, from our conversations, I have to say your English is pretty amazing.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And, a new
Well,
language. I used to learn French
sorry.
like two years ago,
Oh, French.
and yeah, I studied a full year of French, but I had to quit because I didn't have enough time for myself and work. You know, it is tough sometimes.
French is
Um,
hard, man. That's a hard language.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is absolutely. But like I said, you know, since I speak Spanish, French is, you know, easier for me to learn than a native English speaker. I wish I could say a great achievement. Je parle français aussi, but I'm way too far from that.
I'm pretty much at like je suis bien. That's pretty much where I'm at. And sorry, that accent was probably offensive. I didn't intend to be. I'm gonna probably cut that out later. That was bad.
It doesn't matter. Mine was terrible too.
No. No, honestly, like yeah, like how like that is something I'm interested in. Like how is what is it like learning French as a Spanish speaker? Because they're both Romance languages. Like, is that difficult? I mean, you said it
Yeah.
was. You said it was, but like, do you find it easier than English or no?
Um, it's a tough question. You know, I grew up with English. Like I remember when I was 9, 10, 11. I used to love English so very much, and I didn't have the resources to study because you had to pay for it, and I was really poor back then, and but yeah, I was like really obsessed with the language, and that's something that didn't happen with French. But maybe if that was French instead of English, I would be in the position to say that, yo, well, English is harder.
Yeah, I agree.
But if I take a person, and I say a 20-year-old person, and I say you have to pick between this language and that one, I would say that he pretty much would find French easier in English.
Yeah, I think I do think it has a lot to do with like yeah. I mean, like for me in Spanish, I've had an interest since I was very young, and growing up in like neighborhoods where you know Spanish was like you know that was the go to second language. So I mean, like if I grew up in Canada, I probably would have a better interest in something like French. But
Yeah,
you said you were obsessed with English. I think that I think you kind of have to be a little bit obsessed with the language to really learn it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to succeed. Yeah, that's the key.
I agree. And
That's why some people find it like really hard because they you don't always learn a language just because you want to.
mhm.
Sometimes you just have to for um, immigration reasons or um, work. Let's say that your boss he wants you to learn English because you're gonna have a new task and you're meant to speak the language. Well, that person wouldn't find it fun to learn their language, and in my case, it was. I really enjoyed learning English.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
That's the difference.
Your English is way better than my Spanish. Even though I studied it in college, you've come out you've done an amazing job. I mean, yeah, seriously, man.
Yeah, well, I pay attention and I to those details when pronouncing a word or a phrase, um, a single letter. It's not the same to say, I don't know, rice and rice. That Z sound, in order to change the meaning of a word, and that's something that does not happen in Spanish. You, you can tell because there's no difference between the letter B and V,
Yeah,
you know, and that's why Spanish speakers find those details hard to replicate, and yeah, that's the hardest thing to do.
yeah, and I can't speak for all Americans, but like I know I appreciate when someone at least makes an effort. I think I think that's always a big step because it's not always easy. Like when it comes to a second language, you're sometimes concerned. Oh, are they going to criticize me, or are they gonna hate me for it? Because I've noticed that when I'm speaking Spanish, you can be self conscious sometimes. But like I
Yeah.
feel like I do. I think there has to be a level of respect when someone's making the effort, though, and I don't always think that respect is there, but I think people should give that respect.
Oh yeah, for sure, because it's a huge effort, and the people think that they pretend you to speak perfectly, and that they would like you said criticize them, and but if you don't, you don't give it a try, if you don't put yourself in a position where you have to speak that language, and then you're not gonna learn. It's
Yeah.
simple as that.
I, one thing I think you have to like come to terms with is you have to let people correct you because yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yes.
because you're not going to learn otherwise. And I've had a lot of people correct me with my Spanish, but like it's a good thing because you just repeat what you said the right way, and they um yeah, it's definitely a learning experience, but it can be intimidating though.
Well, I remember now that you're bringing this up. Um, I used to speak a lot with this friend from Australia. His name is Chris, and I used to tell him, "You have to correct every mistake that I make." And he said, "I'm not comfortable with it." He said,
Mm.
And I said, I don't mind. I don't feel offended by any way. That's the way. That's the right way to learn. And well, he said, all right, I will. And whenever I made a mistake, he would correct me, and that's how I learned. Pronunciation, spelling, everything. I pretty much owe everything to this guy. He's amazing. Chris is amazing.
You know, I talked to somebody. It was she's my superior. I'm not going to name her name, but like she I consider her my friend, and she had said she said that she was a little bit anxious about trying to speak Spanish because she's concerned that she might use when she's trying to imitate the accent, she might come off as offensive. But I was trying to like let her know that like if you don't make that first step, like you kind of have to start somewhere, and you might honestly offend somebody, but like I mean that's kind of you kind of have to take that risk when you're learning a language.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with it.
Because like and I even told her like if you really want to learn another language, it's good to like have somebody that like you're friends with first, because like then there's already a little bit of trust there. So if you do come off as offensive, it's not necessarily as big of a deal. Like I spent a lot of time practicing with one of my best friends. She's from Mexico, and I don't worry about offending her, because when I start gaining weight, she'll rub my stomach and call me pregnant. So like yeah, yeah, she'll ask me when the baby's due. So it's like something like that. So yeah.
That's what best friends do, man.
Oh yeah. I told her about that, and the my superior, and she was like, "Tell her she's mean." I'm like, "No, no, no, no." Like I was trying to tell her, like we've known each other for 8 years. Like we do stuff like that.
Yeah, well, 8 years is a lot of time. She was allowed to do that.
Yes, yes, it was. Yeah, she would. Oh man, people didn't understand what she said because she would mostly speak in Spanish, but she would say some some really out there stuff, and people be like, "Oh, she's so sweet," not knowing what she's saying.
Well, I got a question for you, Alex.
Shoot.
Um, you said that you practiced with Mexican people,
Yes.
right? Was that the first time that you met me, that you spoke with an Argentinian guy?
Oh, I'm not sure because where I used to work, we used to get a lot of people from down south. So we used to get a lot of different people. It might have been honestly. I know like I've spoken with Venezuelans and Mexicans, Guatemalans, or at least one Guatemalan. You might be the first, honestly, or at least one of the first.
All right, how did you find my Spanish accent? I mean, how different was from a Mexican person?
Oh, it is pretty different, honestly. It's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what the difference is because, like, I don't know how to necessarily manifest that in words, but it's definitely different.
Yeah, well, Argentina and Uruguay are like they're brothers, man. They speak the same. I wouldn't be able to know if it was a person from Argentina or Uruguay that is speaking. Honestly,
Or from where? You said Uruguay?
yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I've ever met anybody from Uruguay.
But Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, I don't know, Peru, they all have different accents, but we're like there's no other country that speak like us, and that's crazy. It's really crazy.
Pretty awesome.
We're the only ones that say vos
Yes.
instead of tu.
That's actually like yeah, that's I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Bose comes from Latin. I mean, of course it does because it's a Romance language, but yeah, like I believe I think "wos" is a word in some forms of I think classical Latin. I could be wrong though. My Latin is not the best.
Yeah.
You ever
Well,
study Latin?
I wanted to tell you when are you coming? I'm sorry. When are you coming?
Oh, to Argentina?
Yeah, I want you to come over, man.
Oh
That'll be
man, I'd love to come.
crazy.
It's just the two big ones, man. It's money and time, and now it's COVID too. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah, bad combination.
really bad. Oh no, I mean, honestly, if I had the money, and if I was between semesters, I would come down in a heartbeat. But it's just like it's just oh man, it's my car has been giving me some funky noises, and I don't know if I'm gonna have to repair that soon. So like whenever I save some money, I feel like I end up having to use it for something.
Estoy esperándote. Yeah, whenever your car makes a noise, you already know that you're gonna have to pay a lot of money out of
Yeah,
that.
hopefully not. I really hope not, because we just replaced the engine on that thing, and that was expensive.
Oh yeah, the engine is the most expensive thing of the car.
Yeah, I actually had to borrow money for that. I did not. I did not have that on hand. I'm still
All
paying
right,
that off.
I'm gonna lend you a few bucks if you want me to.
No, you don't gotta do that. Honestly, I'm gonna try to get all my schoolwork out of the way so I can get pull in some extra hours doing Uber Eats.
Yeah, that sounds really tough. Well, Alex, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, man. Gotta do some homework stuff,
Yeah, I am
but
so sorry I kept you so long.
it's all right. I really enjoyed it as always, and hope to see you later again. All right,
All right, peace out. Dios te bendiga.
take good care. You too.
All right, well, that was fun. So I wanted to bring up some other things about the English language. We have a number of digraphs like th or sh makes the sh sound. Um, hmm. Oh, this is a good point to make. So if we look at the Darwinian evolution as applies to the English language, we see how we see how compound words eventually develop sometimes into words that aren't necessarily anymore considered compound words. I mean, for example, tomorrow isn't usually viewed in the modern vernacular as a compound word, but what's kind of fascinating is it definitely was a compound word. Um, so we have tomorrow, tonight, and today, right? So what did people say in early modern English? Like one example being Elizabethan English. We might say on the morrow, right? And what's morrow a cognate with? Morning, right? So it's interesting to consider that tomorrow being a compound word of the words to and morrow. And so At one point, you might have said on the morrow, and it seems like it may have developed into simply tomorrow, to the morrow, tomorrow, right? To the morning. In Spanish, you would say en la mañana, in the morning, when you would say tomorrow. So it's, at least in some vernaculars, as you noticed, my guest was Argentinian, and how they use vos instead of tu, and different. There are different. There are different vernaculars. Um, and pardon me a moment. I'm drawing a blank. Been very busy week. I'm just trying to think of the word I'm looking for. Dialects. Yes, sorry. Yeah, they're different dialects, so keep that in mind. But so tomorrow was originally, it would appear, a compound word. And like I said, if we look at early modern English on the morrow, we can compare it to modern Spanish en la mañana, and it means practically the same thing. And mañana and morrow are cognates for morning, or at least rough cognates. Obviously, words change with time, and I'm not going to say it's the exact meaning is intact, or the same. The exact meaning is I'm not saying it's an exact equivalent, but pretty close, right? Pretty close. Um, which kind of leads me to, since I had an Argentinian guest on, it brings me to think of a very common compound word in Spanish, which is goodbye, and they say adios. The preposition is a preposition. It's a preposition, so it means something like to, and then Dios meaning God, adios meaning to God. So it's an easy way to remember adios is goodbye. Is you're kind you could think of yourself as wishing the person to go to God on their journeys. I think there was a more complicated explanation for why they say adios that way. I think there was a phrase that was once said, a full phrase that later got, I believe, eventually subtracted from to become adios, but I could be mistaken about that. Now, early in earlier forms of English, we had the ligature ash, which is a letter that is something of a combination. It's a ligature of A and E. Now, when I think of ligatures, I often think of the German ligature SZ, which is a combination of the long S. If you're not familiar with what the long S is, I recommend you look that up. And then the letter Z, the letter Z, with a tail. So it looks like a funky B, one might say, but it's really the letters, the long S and Z with a tail pushed together. The long S is interesting because we do see the long S up until, I believe, the 1800s. And the long S, if you're not familiar with it, you should definitely look it up. A very English manifestation of the letter S. Now, the S we use in modern English today, I shouldn't say modern English in general, because it seems like in early modern English, the long S still seemed to be present in certain circumstances. I can think of at least one example, which I believe was the Encyclopedia Britannica, I think, had a long S in the 1800s. The short S comes from the one manifestation, the one conjugation of the letter of sigma, I believe. I believe it's at the end of a word. I believe it looks something like our modern S. And that's something else to note too, is that the English the modern English alphabet borrows heavily from the Greek and Latin alphabets. Now, in Old English, the original alphabet was the runic alphabet, which later, eventually, Old English began to be written in the Latin alphabet with some of the runes still borrowed, like thorn and I believe win were still used in this next in this new um, appearance of the English alphabet. And if you look at texts like Beowulf, if you look at the original manuscript, you'll notice it won't look. Uh, you'll notice some things about the lettering and about how things are written. Um, you'll notice the uppercase H looks very different than it does today. It looks more like a lowercase h with a little line through it, um, which we can see. I can see how that still bears a resemblance to the modern uppercase H. Now, lowercase letters seem to have developed during a time period when texts were written in ink, because when texts were written with ink on parchment, you'd have the first letter on a page would be huge, be very detailed, but the smaller letters, the ink would bleed, and the smaller writing would look different than that first initial letter. The first initial letter could be detailed without the bleeding having much effect on the letter because it was so big. But the smaller letters, since the bleeding would have more of an effect on those letters, it eventually gave rise to the letters we have today. Because if we look at the Latin alphabet in actual ancient Roman architecture, you'll notice only capital letters because that's originally how it was. Another interesting thing about the alphabets we use today, in Spanish, the letter Y is pronounced Y, which literally means the Greek I, because the letter Y, as well as the letter Z, these are letters that are borrowed from from the Greek alphabet, not the Latin alphabet. Now, in some dialects of Spanish, you'll W will be pronounced either W, oh sorry, W or W, W or double V. That's another thing. The letter in earlier manifestations of English, V and U were they were the same. They were the same letter. So if you read the King James Bible, I'm not talking about the King James that you often buy at the store, but like if you actually buy a King James Bible that is relatively true to the original print, the original publication, you'll see the word have spelled H-A-U-E. Now, I mentioned Beowulf a little earlier, and I honestly, here's something, I honestly can't, I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about the English language without bringing up Beowulf. Beowulf was written in Old English. So I have some of it memorized. So it goes something like, What way Gordena, in Gardegum, Theod Kuninga, Thrum Gefrunen, Huda Atalingus, Elin Frebeden, Offshud Shipping Shethena, Threatum Monegum, Magtham, made a settler of Thea, Eoras Sutan, Arrest, Theashaft Funden, Heidas Frofregebad, Wilks under Wuknum, Wirth Mundum da, Afat him agwuk, Thara Setendra. Now, if I misplaced any words, mispronounced any words, forgive me. Old English is I have never majored in Old English, and I don't pretend to. I did just find it fascinating. But I mean, we can already find a cognate in the first lines, and I kind of feel on the spot, so I may have mixed my words up a little bit, but I think I got it right. But the first portion of that, what way Gordena, what we Speardanes. So way is a cognative we. What is a cognative what. Um, Also, by the way, it also, if you understand the origin of like the old English origin of the word what, you now have a better understanding why what has an H in it. It's silent now. It's really bizarre. But in Old English, all the letters, to the best of my knowledge, all the letters were pronounced. And I'm actually going to try that just one more time, real quick. Just what way Gordena, in Gardegum, Theod Kuninga, Thrum Gefrunen, Huda Atalingus, Ellen Fremenen, Offshuld Sheffing Chethe, Offshuld She, Offshuld Sheffing Shethena, Threatum, Maneg, Thomera Settler, Aftea, Aorlus, Sutan Rest. No, I'm not going to go through it. I feel too much on the spot, and I'm messing with my limited knowledge. But I will continue on to another topic. Now, we did talk about how English. Ooh, here's something I'd like to bring up too. To future listeners, as it seems we have no viewers at the moment, but um, languages that are similar to English. Shetlandic, I think it's sometimes considered a dialect of Scots, but I think an argument could be made that Shetlandic could be argued to be its own distinct language. Now, I do have some of a poem that was called, I think it's called "Bowl My Sheep," memorized, and it's in Shetlandic, and you can notice how similar it is to English. Um, we gang to the kirk, and we gie our alms. We say our prayers and we sing our psalms. And when a hoose is blinded and mourns to death, we visit the folk and we send a wreath. And slip the bairns a penny or twa, then blithe when we're out in a wafet ah. We could have done something to show we were caring when we heard of the lass that was hand a bairn. And we might have studied that crater a bit, a drank himself silly just trying to forget. And say for the want of a hand clasp, he was left to redout his ain with hesp. We sit at the hearthstane in criticise Disseen's class and the Nixteen's wise, and masking truth wi' a bit of fun, say God be blessed that we're no like yon, and rowing o'er to bed content at another day was nobly spent. Did we send 23 shillings to ice their state, to help to get medicine shelter and met, or shack our heads and say, dear, dear, Lord be praised that it's no like yon here. So, we gang to the kirk and we gie our alms. So, gang to the kirk, we go to the church, right? We gang to the kirk. Ta, da, to the, gang. Think of Germanic languages. Think of like German, ging. Very similar. It's very similar. Um, so you can see it's a language that has a lot of similarities to English, but it's definitely not English, right? And it has connections, right? So it's not, obviously it's not a product of English. It is something in and of itself unique, and it's interesting because these kinds of languages exist. And the thing is too, when it comes to the evolution of language, is it doesn't necessarily take place in isolation all the time. I mean, cultures interact and people influence one another. There are certain cases of relative isolation, and there are certain very unique cases of great isolation. But often there's all this influence, there's all this clashing and mixture of cultures. That's why it's one of the reasons it's so problematic when people try to claim their culture as something that is when people think of their own culture as something um, purer than other cultures. It's problematic to me because all of our cultures um, bear the fingerprints of, and quite honestly, probably more than that, of other cultures. We're not, we don't develop in vacuums. Um, I mean, and one could argue maybe certain island communities may have been isolated, but even going back, maybe in some cases thousands of years, um, it's very likely that that their ancestors at some point in time were influenced by alternative cultures as well. So even in the cases where people are isolated relatively well for years, it's not complete isolation. And there has been so much evidence of world travel in the ancient world that it's hard for me to say with confidence that even the communities we think of as isolated didn't have any kind of potentially any kind of influence from another culture. Um, Even if that influence was relatively minute, it's still potentially there. I wanted to, if anyone, if anyone cares to think about it, I had wanted to talk about one last thing before I go, which is I wanted to talk more about the unique. I should probably say. I think I said weird earlier, but I mean unique. The unique um, plurals that we have in the English language, and some of them are very unique to say, at least to the outsider, I think. And I think a lot of English speakers agree that it's like, why do we do it this way? And once again, it's part of the cultural influence. These plurals, English. It's not a purely Germanic language. It has heavy influences from Romance languages. It seems. In modern English and very modern English, we have influences even from languages like Arabic and Sanskrit. The English language is incredibly culturally diverse. Um, it's incredibly culturally diverse, and we can see examples of that in the plural. So a lot of plurals in English end with s, but we have like the plural of foot is feet, the plural of house is houses, the plural of goose is geese, the plural of moose is moose, the plural of fish is fish, the plural of nebula is nebulae, which is I brought that up earlier. And then we have words like synthesis, plural syntheses, hypothesis, plural syntheses, and then you have words like stratum, plural strata, and some of these I mentioned earlier. I'm looking at my notes, and a lot of these we mentioned earlier, and the plural of yes, stratum. Oh, the plural of aquarium is aquaria. The millennium, millennia, and there are more. And I know I was mistaken earlier that was not the final thing I wanted to bring up. I did want to talk about something else really quick. There was a couple more topics I wanted to go over. Um, not okay, maybe not topics, but there were a couple more things I want to bring up. So obviously English, like Spanish, has a multitude of dialects, and something I didn't bring up earlier about Elizabethan English, early modern English, is that the second person pronouns in early modern English could be plural or singular. Ye, plural; thou, thee; thine, thy, singular; you, plural. And that's something you might think in modern English and contemporary English would be completely gone, but that's not necessarily the case. That's not necessarily the case. In some Southern dialects, and earlier I said Southern when referring to countries like Mexico and Argentina and Venezuela. Now I'm talking about southern in relation to the United States of America, Georgia, Tennessee, maybe even Florida. In some dialects of southern U.S. English, we still see this distinction in the second person pronouns. So in some dialects, you might say you for singular, but you might say y'all for plural. You singular, y'all plural. And y'all, of course, it's it's a shortened version of the words you all. Of course, it does not seem completely intuitive to use you as singular because, like I said, in early modern English, it was plural, so it might seem confusing. Evolution, whether we're talking about biology or language, the world around us, it is confusing. So, but we can oftentimes find common commonalities with things, and whether those commonalities are realistic, whether they are parts of, whether they are, whether whether we're just making connections in our mind because that's how our mind works, or if there's something truly there, it's kind of hard to say. For example, I'm talking about how evolution applies to linguistics. Think about here's something that actually occurs in language as well as in biology. It's called convergent evolution, and that's when something, it's when the same thing evolves in separate environments. For example, the eyeball, or not the eyeball per se, but the eye has evolved more than once. Wings, the wings of birds, the wings of pterosaurs, the wings of insects, flying insects. I should have said flying birds earlier, but yeah, pterosaurs, flying birds, bats, and flying insects, their wings all evolved completely separately, but they all evolved the ability to fly with wings. Pretty fascinating. Their wings are all structured very differently. It's fascinating. It's interesting, and the same thing probably happens in language. In fact, I'm really certain it does, and I think other scholars would agree that the same thing can evolve. The same, a very similar sounding word can occur, can be developed in two words that sound alike and have similar meanings, can develop in two separate languages, but they might have no connection to one another. We have to consider that possibility. And like I said, if you consider like some of the symptoms of what we might call insanity, where people, conspiracy theories is an example that often I think gets brought to mind. People, we like to connect, the human ape likes to connect things that often have no relation. And because of that, we have to be careful when we see a cognate, for example, like even the earlier example I said of manana and morrow. Although I'm fairly certain they share a root word. In biology, we'd call it a common ancestor. In linguistic evolution, we'd call it a common root word. I'm pretty sure that both of those words share a common root word, a common ancestor, but I'm not certain about that. I don't know. And I have to keep that in mind. And I think we all should keep that in mind, is that we just don't know. We don't know if if when we see a cognate, if it necessarily means that the two languages share some sort of history. We just don't know that. And I wanted to leave with one of my favorite words in the English language, and I have a lot of them. Pardon me, but I'd like to share it. And if we do any more, if we do any other episodes on the English language, I'll probably include I'll probably share more of my favorite English words. I have quite a few, but antediluvian, and this word just refers to preceding. If I'm not mistaken, it refers to preceding um, the Great Flood mentioned in the book of Genesis. Genesis, sorry. We usually call it Genesis. A lot of people of Hebraic descent would call the book Bereshith. Bereshith. Um, and of course, that brings up a whole other topic of comparative religions. Like, is the flood talked about in Genesis the same flood talked about by certain Native Americans? Did the Christian missionaries influence Native American cultures to bring up stories of a flood, or did it precede the mission? Did it come? Did those stories come before the missionaries? What about like floods in other cultures? I think the Epic of Gilgamesh talks about a great flood. I could be mistaken, but I think it does. Um, so comparative religions definitely, and comparative cultures and cultural histories definitely a topic for another episode. Um, I kind of threw that in there, and I think it's a fun topic. But antediluvian, it's a fun word to say. So I mean, if you have reason to use it, it's a fantastic word, and I'm sure it'll make you sound smart if you use it right. Uh, Also remember this: you can use a big word and not sound smart. You have to use it very methodically. You have to use it very skillfully. You you have to be aware of what you're doing. And that line of thought leads me to think about things like um, what to do and what not to do in romantic relationships. Again, a topic for another episode. But I really appreciate anyone who stopped by for listening to this. This is experimental, and I'm planning to do more. Just casual talks with friends and acquaintances, and anyone who's interested in being a guest, could be as little as 5 minutes. Doesn't have to be long. Contact me in the comments. I'd love to have you, and I hope you guys have a great day. I really do.